Hi, my name is Christian Coons. I'm a philosophy professor at Bowling Green State University. I've been kicked off campus for almost a year now, and I'm not allowed to speak to anyone. The reason, once again, was that I mentioned a cover up on our campus. Cover up, of course, can mean lots of different things. Some of things almost pedestrian or normal in institutional environments, and sometimes it can mean something quite illegal. And so I'm going to quickly, hopefully, explain exactly what form the cover up took. And in the description, I will include the evidence of what I'm saying. And hopefully, someone will act on this. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to get help all on your own, especially when a giant false record has been written and when so much time has passed. Again, it's not like was normalcy after this cover up. No, that's just when the chaos began, and I've been trying to report it ever since, just for my own safety. So I'm going to explain just how serious this is and what I mean by a cover up, and you will have proof if you're interested in looking at it in the description below. So, what was it a cover up of? It was a cover up of fraud, fraud about the candidates in a job search, fraud about the rules for the job search, and even fraud about the results. It looks like we even offered the job to a candidate early when the candidate was not preferred and when all the interviews had not been conducted yet. The basic form it took was that there were candidates that were ahead of the candidate that was eventually offered the job, and they were each removed by illicit means. So we'd lie about those candidates. People would lie about those candidates that were ahead, or they'd be removed because of marital status, all to make it that this particular person that we hired was a contender when they didn't even meet the internal standards for what counted as qualified, and they were not preferred. All these tricks didn't even make it the case that the individual actually won the vote. There was even deception there. The actual crimes involve various instances of fraud, rigging a public contract, having a double standard for one candidate. It looks like there was a job that was presented as an open job, but wasn't an open job at all. It was already rigged for one person. In fact, one of the people involved expressed exactly that view at the outset of the search. And so it also involves two instances of Title IX-7 sexual discrimination during the search as well. So that's the actual underlying illegal conduct. I did not report it right away. I was worried that it would literally destroy our department if I reported it right away. In fact, the person who seemed like the worst actor, even though I now believe it was probably the chair, Kevin Valier, asked me to forgive him after this search, and I did. And so my department became sort of a secret, corrupt place. But, I wasn't rocking the boat. I was just sitting in my office, sad about the state of our department. And then retaliation occurs. And that's what I end up trying to report. So my chair is afraid I'm going to report. Valier might be afraid of that too. And so there's this campaign of systematic well poisoning, lying both to my colleagues and outside of the department, to other administrators and to people outside in the discipline about what happened in this search. It came to a head when it became so bad that the chair, for reasons I won't explain here, ends up making up that I've been in his office yelling at him about a bizarre conspiracy theory that I definitely had never asserted at all and can prove I never did. And I hadn't even been in his office. So he was just trying to paint me as insane in front of my peers when I'd literally done nothing at all except for keep these guys' secrets. And then, due to these lies, junior faculty members who are not even involved in any of this dirtiness start screaming at me and threatening me because of lies that have been told behind my back by these two people who are, they've rigged a search, and now they're going to start a pattern of trying to get rid of or fire people illicitly too. So same games, not to add faculty, but now to remove them. That's what brings me to file a report. I'll explain what happens to that report. It's very odd. So when the line and threats become a little too much, I end up just desperately trying to report it. I talked to a colleague in another department, Luis Moreno, who suggests that I talk to the union, of course, which seems to make sense. This ends up being one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I tell the union that I was, a potential whistleblower, and so I'd been subject to what I call disenfranchising defamation to try to undermine my reports or my possible future reports. And this ended up culminating in people screaming in my face and threatening me, and me not being able to correct the record. And the representative from the union said these are not violations of the CPA. They're not reportable anywhere on campus. If there's defamation, you can file a lawsuit. Otherwise, get out of here. He's this disbarred felon. I don't know. He was very rude and stuff like, it was odd. It was awful. At any rate, I said to him, but this was all related directly, I can show, to trying to cover up illegal conduct, so isn't that retaliation? And he says, retaliation requires losing your job or getting a pay cut, so that's not retaliation. And so I just said, yeah, but people are screaming in my face, and the chair is just making up stuff about me so that I can't even operate safely in the department. Surely this has got to be against the school rules somehow. And he says no, and I say, this doesn't sound right. I need help. I'm just going to report this illegal conduct directly. Go report the Title IX-7 violations. Go report the fraud itself, which I was afraid to do because I thought it would destroy the department. I just wanted help with all the abuse. But no matter how I report it, in this case, finally, the ombudsman for the union also says, well, there might be one way I can help. Are you really delusional? Are you mentally ill? Because if you tell me that, then maybe we could file a claim that you're being discriminated against on the basis of a disability. His name's Phil Stinson. And anytime I speak up in public, by the way, a little bit, and try to tell what's been happening in the story, two kinds of people descend on me. Weird, sort of like student reporters that are part of, versions of things like Turning Point USA, but it's not Turning Point, but sort of conservative journalists, people want to get the story. My conjecture is they want to, I don't know, that's what happens, oddly. And the other thing that happens is people that are victims of our union's leadership, specifically Phil Stinson, say they know about this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I say I'll just report this directly then, because this can't, it has to stop. And he says, no, that's a violation of school policy too. You cannot go to HR. You can't go to Title IX-7 or equity and compliance. You have to go to a dean first. That's school policy. That's how these things are done. And then that ends up being, that's also what the dean tells me too. And bad things happen, as you'll see. So the next step, I go to the dean, and then there's a year where he does literally nothing. He wants to know all about what happens, what I have evidence of, what I don't have evidence of, but he doesn't want any evidence. And there's a demand from my peers not to push these complaints or bad things will happen to me. Try to deal with it in-house. punchline there is that when I do when I do exactly as I've been asked to do, extorted to do, those emails are then reported by the extorter as abuse of Brandon Warmke. And Brandon does the same. Everyone knows that I've been asked by them to send those emails, and then they reported them, and they're just about to cover up, basically, the abuse that I hadn't been able to speak about for a year. Anyway, sorry for that digression. I have to wait a year. Everyone says you need to shut up until this Koch grant is signed. And then the Koch grant is signed, and they just conduct the following type of investigation. So remember, it's retaliation. I'm trying to get all this abuse addressed in some form or other, whether it's considered a retaliation complaint, whatever, it needs to end. And I explain in the report that it's related to all this illegal conduct. This obviously, presumably scared the school that there was this, some of it's criminal, right? And they've held it out of the relevant authorities. And so they have to make it go all the way. And the way they did that was they changed what my complaints were. So instead of even looking at all at the abuse that I needed addressed desperately and had to be quiet about for a year, it's just thrown out of the scope of their investigation without telling anybody. All of the illegal conduct is thrown out as well, the first order illegal conduct, except for there is an oblique reference to one of the Title 7-9 violations, sexual discrimination. How did they investigate it? They refused all evidence. When I begged to submit evidence, they wouldn't let me submit it. It's told I may not, that I was being disruptive, that comes later, and the day never came. And so they swapped out all the real complaints. They turned it into complaints about procedure that I didn't even really make, because I don't even know proper procedure, because the rules have been hidden and we've been lied to about the rules. And the rules continue to be hidden for years later. We live in an apartment where the chair hides the bylaws. Anyway, so they switch it with procedure, classic sort of cover-up move. But even worse is that they added new complaints that I'd never made that were designed to make me look crazy. And said those were my complaints. Stuff that no one in their right mind would complain about. You couldn't have any evidence for it. Said ridiculous sounding things. Then they summarized it and said I didn't have any evidence for any of my claims or my weird conspiracy theories, which I didn't complain about at all. And then they sat down with my peers in a meeting and told them that I was trying to get them fired, but I was delusional and didn't have any evidence for anything I'd said. And then I started to complain, obviously, contact HR directly. There was a cover-up. They didn't address these complaints. There's this illegal conduct. I was trying to get help with this abuse. There's no reply ever. Just no reply ever. None from HR. None. Everything is ignored from then on out. And then those complaints where I try to tell my peers what actually happened get disciplined as abuse of Brandon Warmke when they don't have anything to do with Brandon Warmke. They have to do with a cover-up. Anyway, I asked questions of my own union. Well, what's going on here? Like, are they ever going to investigate the other stuff? Or do they think that's an investigation of the criminal activity or what? It's written in a way where it's not clear what this was an investigation of. And eventually, after I file a state complaint, the school does do something. they get a appointee named Jennifer McHugh of the Attorney General's office to address these issues. And what she says, and the verdict is not delivered till like 3 years later. And I'm told to be quiet and be patient and disciplined anytime I talk about the misconduct in between, was that was a great investigation, that was a proper Title VII 9 investigation. There was no reason for the actual compliance agents to look at it. That was a proper criminal investigation. That was a proper retaliation investigation. Not with any analysis. And that's how it's been treated. And still, if I file a report about new or old abuse, to be completely ignored. We just live in a lawless environment. So that's the kind of cover-up it was. Switched out the charges, tried to make me look insane, didn't even address them. And to the extent that they obliquely mentioned one of them, all they did was poll, basically, the offenders and asked if they did it. And they concocted a story that they somehow learned at the last minute that one of our candidates had no interest in ethics or political philosophy, when it's demonstrably true that the opposite is true. So that's the story. That's the cover-up. Okay, so bad, yeah, just pretending that something was a law enforcement investigation when it was no investigation at all. Oh, and they admitted the illegal conduct too on record. That's recorded. So they are aware that it happened, intentionally avoided addressing it, covered it up knowing it occurred. All right, thank you.